There was one film I worked on, and I won't say it was. In the mornings, the director was directing really kind of fast, and then he would have a few joints at lunchtime. And in the afternoon, everything started getting really languid. It was really funny. We were all laughing, but I mean, you can see it if you kind of know.
Who are you? Where are you from? And what do you do?
I think that's a real existential question I have with myself all the time. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. My name's Roger Deakins, and, well, I suppose I'm categorised as a cinematographer. I'm from Torquay in Devon in England. How about you?
James Ellis Deakins. I'm from the East Coast, let's put it that way.
The USA.
Of the USA, as opposed to
Tell
the
by
UK.
Your accent, really, can't we?
Oh, I don't know. I can do an English accent. I know that drives you crazy.
Don't do that when we go to England. That's really bad.
And what do? I try and keep you on track. I organize.
Yeah, you keep me sane. That's what you do, huh? Yeah.
I do a lot more than that, but that's fine.
What's the one thing we never travel without? I never travel without her.
That's a good one.
And you never travel without
me.
me, so that's that one done. What's your favourite movie soundtrack?
There's a lot of them, and I know there's one that's... You go on that one and let me think about this.
Well, in Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, Sam Peckinpah's movie, Bob Dylan singing Knocking on Heaven's Door, which is pretty beautiful. I mean, it's a lovely song, but it works so well in the film. I kind of really like that. I'd either say that or Ennio Morricone, Once Upon a Time in the West, really.
Actually, that is good.
Yeah, well, any of the spaghetti westerns, Sergio Leone westerns that Morricone did are wonderful, aren't they?
What's the first thing you do when you wake up?
Go and make a cup of tea.
Yeah,
Couldn't live without tea. Need tea to start in the mornings, don't we? If you could take an elevator ride with anyone, who would it be and why? Jean Cocteau to the underworld. That would be really interesting.
To the underworld?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, he was very deep, you know. I don't know. It came out of my head. I don't know why that came out. Things do. What would you say?
Maybe Aristotle to... I don't know where, maybe the Parthenon, I don't know.
The underworld as well, really. Okay,
the underworld,
well,
right.
That's enough of that. It's getting too deep.
What was the last album you listened to?
Oh, I mean, the last album. I don't tend to listen to albums so much. I think it was the last Cowboys Junkies. The Cowboy Junkies last album, I think I listened to.
It could be also Van Morrison or Townes Van Sant for you.
Yeah.
That's probably the soundtrack that you really liked.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But his last album was quite a while ago, wasn't it? Whereas the Cowboy Junkies just released one only last year. So that was...
You're much more current then. Yeah.
When things go wrong on set, how do you maintain your spirit for problem solving?
Well, you have to have a sense of humor, that's for sure. So you have to start laughing at it. You have to believe the problem can be solved.
Yeah. This is a question for you, but I'm going to answer it as well.
Okay, please do.
When something goes wrong on set to me, I imagine myself out in my little boat fishing and go, you can put up with it, you know what I mean?
What's your latest obsession? Wow.
My latest obsession? I must have walked about 20 miles this morning trying to find a photograph in Chicago. It's really hard. Oh, go on. No, you've got to answer it then.
Well, it's not that interesting, but I would say working with the software Resolve right now.
Your latest obsession?
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
You think so?
Yes,
I don't think you do.
It might have sounded sarcastic.
It did sound sarcastic, actually.
But this is good, pertinent to the Resolve. What were the greatest challenges in the early days of developing DI workflows? Now, you can talk at length.
Yeah, I know. I could be really boring. But I think the biggest challenge was the fact that the computers couldn't handle it yet, so it crashed all the time.
Yeah, that was a problem.
Yes.
And then you lost all the work.
Yeah, 2 weeks worth of work, and then you were back again at the beginning of the reel.
I had to think about being out in my boat fishing to keep myself sane.
And also, it was kind of like the software was more clumsy, so it wasn't as fine-tuned. So you were trying to do something, and then you'd go over the mark, and you have to come back. And so to get the look that you're going for, it would take a lot longer, and then the computer would crash, so you'd do it again.
But isn't it crazy? We're talking about a digital, workflow as being so old-fashioned. It's almost like, you know what I mean? It's like...
At the time, it seemed so cutting edge.
It was like state of the art. And now it's like, my God, you used to do things like that.
But remember that after that first DI, you did say, never again. Never doing another DI in my life. So that lasted 3 films or something, and then...
2. Maybe that was a mistake, though.
But that was also really hard because in the beginning...
People are shooting film again now. Maybe we should go back and shoot film.
Well, I think in the beginning the DIs were also difficult because you were going from film into digital, and the scanners sometimes would skew it a little bit.
The translation,
so you were fighting
the translation was of skin tones was always really difficult. They always came out kind of red, so actors looked like they had puppy red cheeks often, didn't they?
Right.
Painful. So. I don't want to be reminded of that.
What's your pitch?
Yeah, I mean, I've got no pitch. I've got no spiel. I'm not that person, so let's move on. Now's the chance. If you've got a pitch, you've got a whole audience out there. I got a pitch. Everybody should watch Army of Shadows, one of the greatest movies ever made. There's a pitch.
Everybody should watch the movie Lucky.
What we saw the other day. Harry Dean Stanton's last appearance in a movie. It was
pretty good.
Over the 300 plus episodes of the Team Deakins podcast, what has surprised you most about how people start their careers in film?
I think the chicken farmer guy surprised me the most.
Production designer.
Right.
Started off as a chicken farmer
and then sold it.
Make money to study production design.
I think what surprises me is how different everybody's entrance is. And that one person, I think special effects, got into the business by standing outside a studio and handing out his resume until someone finally responded.
Until somebody noticed him out the window of an office and felt sorry for them, and snow was coming down. What are you doing up there, poor boy? And he got a job and never looked back.
Was there a specific moment where you realized we'd be a good team, technically or personally?
Me? I think when I bumped into you in that caravan in Kadoka in South Dakota, you were coming down out the production caravan and I was going up the stairs. I'll never forget that.
But I also think that in the process of working on the movie, we were good collaborators.
We kind of fit together, I mean, you're such an organizer.
You say that like a curse.
I'm so scatty. No. How do you create a sense of trust and support within your team?
I think you develop trust by wanting to hear what they think. I think that's really important, making them part of it. And actually, it makes you do a better job because they may have a better idea. You don't know. But I think everybody should have a stake in what you're doing. And so you just don't tell them what to do. You ask them what they think.
It's allowing for everybody to have their say and recognize they're all trying to do their best.
What practicalities do cowboy boots offer when shooting a film? Now, I know you don't consider them cowboy boots, but they're farm boots.
Farm boots. They're very comfortable, and it's okay if somebody steps on your toe, which happens a lot. Or if you drop a lamp or something, you usually get away with it. They're very comfortable. That's why I'm wearing them now.
And you don't have to think in the morning about what shoe you put on.
I don't have an array of shoes to put on. I got 3 pairs of these, and it's one. Shall I put on that pair or that pair? And they're exactly the same shape.
But, one time Bev came into our closet because I was showing her something. And she saw your side of the closet, and there were all of these white shirts lined up because your uniform on set is blue jeans and a white shirt. And
Yeah.
I asked her, I said, well, what did you think? That he just wore a dirty shirt every time? Because she was amazed you had so many.
She probably thought when I was not working, I'd have Hawaiian shirts or something. That's really me, right?
She knew you better than that. I'd like to see you in a Hawaiian shirt.
Here's one for you. What was your fondest memory of being a lab technician? I knew that would cause a little ruction, yeah.
I think the very first day before I even started on working there, the president of the company was giving me a tour through there, and we went into the printing room, which of course is pitch black, and he turned to me as we're stumbling in there and says, "Oh, can you see in the dark?" And I really did think, can anyone?
Yeah, right.
I mean, really? So that always cracked me up afterwards. But I don't know. I think also because we did so many news shows and it had to turn over so fast, working at midnight by the I love the smell of developer and all of that, working by the processing machines. I always liked that.
Yeah, there was something about chemicals of the photographic process. I used to love working in my dark room because the chemicals and the whole feeling of the tactile feeling of it.
But then that was so funny because when Connie Hall came over for dinner, and we were showing him the house, and he went down and saw your dark room.
Yeah,
I said, "Oh, Roger, that's
what are you
so
thinking? It's old-fashioned. You've got a dark room." But yeah, now I've seen the error of my ways, and I do my photographs online on Photoshop.
Whoops.
Sorry, on my computer. Yeah.
How do you create moonlight? Since you love moonlight.
You put up a bloody big light and shoot it over the set. I don't know. That's such a broad question. I mean, moonlight. What for a day? For a night interior? For an exterior where there's no other light sources? Or I mean, the most challenging moonlight was on No Country for Old Men, which was like I used two Musco lights, which are like 96K units. They're kind of floodlights for stadiums, aren't they? For sports stadiums. And so I had two of those at a long distance, and I really needed three, but production wouldn't allow me three. So I had to suffer with not enough light.
But also,
so usually creating moonlight is very difficult.
You do tend to avoid creating moonlight too. You'd rather go with sources.
Yeah. But if you've got no other lights, I think if you've got any other light source, then you can justify. If you've got a campfire, you want to make the campfire reach as far as possible to light whatever you're doing in a scene. But sometimes you have to mix it, and it's a bit of a conceit because in reality, it's not quite the way it looks like on film. But does your background in classical language influence your approach to the work you do now?
Well, the thing about studying classical languages is all you're doing is reading history, poetry, comedies, plays. So you're getting such a wide variety of experiences in a way by reading all this material and also reading it in the original. I think it really gave me a great idea of storytelling, actually, because that's kind of what it was all about.
I think also learning languages, or my pet beef at the moment is the money being put into the arts has been pulled away, and even though the arts doesn't kind of like on the surface it doesn't help the car industry or manufacturing industry in general or something like that. I think it does because it opens people's minds to creation and kind of like helps them see other ways of thinking and seeing through problems. So I think if you start taking away the arts, you take away a huge kind of layer of social possibilities.
And also reading the histories, because our civilization is based on a lot of their forms of government and their civil setup, that it really gives you an understanding of what was your top priority when filming the border crossing in Sicario?
Wow, that was interesting, wasn't it? Because we actually filmed it on a parking lot in just outside of Albuquerque, wasn't it? It was actually the parking lot for where they'd go ballooning.
Yeah.
Where all the tourists go up in balloons. And Patrice had done that wonderful two sides and a kind of looked like a border crossing with the booths and stuff. But I mean, the most difficult thing was to make that feel real.
And also the fact that we didn't have a lot of time, so we had to really figure out the directions we were shooting and the shots we were going to take in the most efficient way. In order, and I remember it being really hot too.
It was brutally hot.
Yeah.
But we were very lucky. It was kind of full sun for like 2 days, was it?
Right. So it matched.
And and then it's figuring out which shot to do first and how that was all going to work in order. Yeah.
Is the image you see on the monitor during a shoot the same image we see in the cinema? Well, yes. That's what we're going for.
Well, it is, but it implies that I'm sort of sitting by the monitor and looking at the monitor all the time when I'm working on a movie, which is not the truth. I mean, it was the truth on 1917, but because most of the film was operated remotely.
The question could be, is the image that the DIT sees on the monitor,
right?
Because you're on the camera,
right? The only film that was manipulated in post, as opposed to completely created in camera with the lighting and the colors of the light and everything else, was Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Which we already talked about. I mean, which was an extreme.
Also, 1984, because you did the bleach bypass on the prints, right?
Yes, I suppose you could say you were looking. Well, there was no monitors then, so that doesn't really apply, does it?
Okay, you win.
I win, yeah. What I was seeing through the lens was exactly what the audience saw, because I was imagining in my head that it would be desaturated and,
but I think also one of the points is that we try and shoot what we want to see later. We're not planning to manipulate in post.
Right.
So for the director's sake, too, when the director looks at the calibrated monitor, he's seeing... or she is seeing what
I think that's partly a historical thing. Is that's the way we've always worked since before there were monitors and playback and DIs and all the rest. But it's also a creative choice that you want to do it in camera. You want to say to the director on set, this is how I'm going to light it. This is what it will look like down the line.
I also think it's a practical choice because they're always the DI's done at the end of the line, and they always want to turn it over quickly.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to in order to get the look that you want, to rely on having the time in the DI, because half the time they're racing through it.
I think there's a danger. I don't think we've had that problem, but there's a danger for a lot of cinematographers that they maybe don't have the clout in post.
Right.
So you don't know who's going to go into the DI suite and say, it's either the editor or the producer or whatever. Right. And often the cinematographer's not even there.
Yeah, right. And there's the other thing, too, is if you don't have your dailies looking the way that you want them to look, they are living with it maybe for 9 months. And the scene is blue. And at the time you say, okay, they came back from the lab blue or whatever, but that's not what I want. But by the time we get into the DI, it's what they've lived with, and that's what seems right.
Right.
So it's so much better to establish it. What qualities make the Alexa your go-to system?
I don't know, but it's like, everything. I've always wanted something that seems to match my eye, what I see. So I want something that's very clean, and it's why I choose certain lenses, isn't it? There's not aberrations. I don't like vignetting unless it's a particular effect. So I'm in the Alexa. But it's not just the look of the image. It's actually the way the camera feels if you're shooting handheld. Yeah. It's all the ergonomics about it, that it just feels kind of comfortable tool to use. When it's sitting on my shoulder and I'm operating, it feels comfortable, you know. But then I've always worked with Arriflex, really, because I felt they've designed their cameras for the operator.
Right, and when they went into digital, they created a camera that was like their film cameras. So for the film people getting into digital, it was very familiar. Well, a lot of other digital cameras were familiar if you were coming from a digital world.
Right.
So I think that was helpful. But also when we saw the tests that they sent, you know, showed us, the color space looked great compared to other tests. It was the first time we saw something that we
did have an influence, I suppose, on their designing it, because before the Alexa there was the D21.
Yeah.
And then we talked about with Arriflex about that and the, you know, benefits and the things we didn't like about it. Like we talked to lens manufacturers about what we like about a lens and what we don't like. Yeah. Whether they take any notice, I don't know. But we talked.
We did a lot of talking.
We do a lot of talking.
Yeah. What kind of fish is your favorite to catch and why?
I love bass fishing, and I love bass as a fish to eat. So I like bass fishing. Yeah.
You told me the reason that bass is because you can come back from fishing and I say, did you catch anything? And you say no, but you caught mackerel, wrasse, pollock, and all these things, but you didn't catch anything because you didn't catch a bass. And you say that the reason why you like the bass catch, you know, that's your key thing, is that they give the biggest fight, and it takes you a half an hour to reel it in.
Yeah,
it's a real skill.
Yeah, they're a hard fish to catch. A mackerel is easy to catch. You put a feather on a hook and you just jig it up and down, you get a mackerel. But a bass are hard to catch. You know, I mean, good sized bass are hard to catch. Yeah, they don't jump into the boat.
Do any but fish jump
Flying
into the
fish
boat?
jump into the boat. When I was sailing around the world, the only fresh food I had was the flying fish that landed on, were hit into the Genoa sail and landed on deck. So we fried them up. They were really good. Yeah, flying fish.
Who's a director you'd love to work with but haven't yet?
Well, I mean, it's obvious. Tarkovsky, Melville, Sam Peckinpah. You know, there's so many, aren't there? But I mean, you know, the filmmakers, the films you love, Visconti, I mean, De Sica, I mean, hell, and there's so many directors I'd love to work with. But, you know, the thing about the films you love, whether it's contemporary directors as well, is they work with other cinematographers.
Right.
And you look at the films Andrei, you know, the Russian director Andrei Zvyagintsev does with Mikhail Krichman. I mean, they do wonderful work. I mean, it would be lovely to work with somebody like that as the director, but, you know, you wouldn't do the same as Mikhail does. And together they create this wonderful world. So, yeah, you know, we've been lucky, haven't we? You've had a huge impact on modern digital workflows. What encouraged you to step forth and fill that role?
Well, just because you needed it, you know, because...
you had no choice, really, did you? Get on with it, James.
Well, and it's also when we got into digital, a lot of productions didn't really know that much about digital, so somebody had to know it. And in order to protect the image, one of us had to really understand the technical.
Yeah, well, we both got thrown in the deep end, didn't we, with Oh Brother Where Art Thou, because it was the first DI for a whole film, and and it was kind of risky, a risky proposition at that time. So you really sort of studied it all, didn't you? And then you kept nagging them. You nagged everybody to make sure it worked, and they were prepared when we got there.
Yeah.
It still took 11 weeks to do, but I mean, it would have probably taken twice as long as if you hadn't been nagging them.
But also nowadays too, there's so many deliverables. So you have to have someone asking what the deliverables are. What do we have to protect in the? Because if we're going to do IMAX, we want to protect top and bottom so we can keep the sides. You know, it's all those kind of things. And then dealing with visual effects. How much are you going to give them on the sides? You never want to give them anything.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
I have to negotiate a deal with them.
Left to myself, I would say, that's it, you're doing that.
Right. Yeah.
IMAX, yeah, but it's going to be widescreen in the middle of your IMAX frame.
Yeah, well, you can't get away with that. When compiling the book, did you find anything from the past that surprised you?
Not really. I mean, I guess I've got a really good memory. So, I mean, most things were there in my mind. It was just a matter of condensing them and figuring out what to put in the book and what to leave out, and I kind of looking at it now think there's things that I wish I'd put in, but, it is what it is.
Well, remember that at one point it was a question about, okay, well, now it's really long. What are we going to take out? And that was really painful.
Yeah, it was.
And originally the book was probably going to be half according to the publisher, half the length, but they were really good in letting us keep going and going.
Yeah.
So it was really a tough decision at times, what's in, what's out.
Yeah, it was also because I kind of wanted to tell a story about my life and our life together later, you're part of it. And then, but it's also for the students and the people that are really interested in the technicalities.
Right.
I felt it, we both felt they had to have that technical side of it as well. So it's trying to, be a lot of things, I suppose. Master of none. Sorry about that.
Between Sicario, Skyfall, and No Country for Old Men, which involved the most experimentation? But there's always experimentation on everything.
Yeah, I mean, every film's so different. You can do a big film like Skyfall or a little film like Sid and Nancy. I mean, they're equal challenges, just in a slightly different way. Experimentation, I don't.
There's always something new on every shoot that we do.
Yeah, it always feels like an experiment, doesn't it, when you start a film, because it feels like you've never done it before. Right. So it's one great experiment.
And is this going to work?
Yeah, well, it is an experiment, really, isn't it? Yeah, any film. You're leaping in the dark in a way.
I have to say that after Skyfall, having never really watched James Bond movies, I had no idea there was a formula. I honestly thought that everything we were shooting was brand new, but then when we got back after the shoot, it was the 50 years anniversary of James Bond, so every night there was a different James Bond movie, and I'd never seen any of them. We saw a little bit each night, and I was shocked that there was always a casino scene. There's always some scene with the car. There's always this scene or that scene. I had no idea.
Well, they're quite similar, but those kind of action movies usually are, aren't they? What can a director learn about storytelling from a great script supervisor?
If the director wants it, the script supervisor is always thinking about the whole movie. So being able to reference the script supervisor and say, well, in that scene that we shot 3 months ago, were they as angry or something? Those kind of things, to have a sort of partner in keeping the whole movie in mind. I think that that's really helpful. I mean, of course, anybody on set who's worked on another set can help any role on set by saying, oh yeah, on this other movie we did it this way. But
I think a director can learn, I think, a lot about pacing. And I don't think people realize that, the script supervisor, you would do a timing of the whole script, imagining and trying to get in the director's head about how he would pace it and stuff. And then when you're on set, you're timing each shot, and then you're timing the scene as you imagine those shots will be cut together. And a director, I think, can learn a huge amount from that, because there's some directors that haven't listened and they've found the scene really hard to cut because they've given the actors, oh, that's really great. Let's give the actor a bit more, give it more time, but they never shot another shot to be able to get out of it.
Right, yeah.
So they're left with this incredibly long shot that may be wonderful, a wonderful mute performance in itself,
but it has to
within
fit in
context.
Yeah, you're right.
Suddenly the film stops. So I think they can really learn about pacing. I think it's very hard for a director to,
with all the things they're thinking about,
to balance, one shot on a Monday with another shot on a Friday, and say, well, they're fitting together and they have to feel like a flow. There was one film I worked on, and I won't say it was, but in the mornings the director was directing really kind of fast, so everything was kind of quite. The acting was rapid, brisk. The dialogue was brisk and everything. And then he would have a few joints at lunchtime. And in the afternoon, everything started getting really languid. And the script supervisor, bless them, kept saying, it's a bit slower than it was this morning. It was really funny. We were all laughing, but I mean, you can see it if you kind of know.
Is cinematography that calls attention to itself always a bad thing?
Yes, very much so. What keeps you coming back to the Athenaeum Center and Chicago in general?
Well, Chicago's a great city. My God, I'm amazed that they don't do more shooting in Chicago because there's so much infrastructure and
so much
different locations. Yeah. But well, we enjoy working with students. We know a university here, DePaul, and so they always bring us in, and so which is really fun. We like to do that.
2 wonderful days there, haven't we? Doing little classes and workshop and stuff. It's kind of really wonderful.
And we love that the Athenaeum Center is will show your stills, which is really great. It's a beautiful
some of my
location.
Pictures on their wall. That's really nice,
which is nice.
Like anybody that does that.
Yeah. So we really like the people, so why not? Does your experience filming in war zones affect how you shoot drama?
I forget who to quote now. There was somebody, one of the directors said, well, if you haven't lived life, how can you talk about it? How can you make films about life? You need to experience it. It might have been someone like John Huston. He really lived his life and then made films. And I think that those experiences led to him being a better filmmaker. So hopefully, maybe that's helped me as a cinematographer, my experiences of life, really.
Did you ever watch a rehearsal and wish you'd been rolling? I think that happens to everybody.
Yeah, it sort of happened early on, actually. And then very often, more lately, films more lately, we would roll, wouldn't we? I mean, shoot rehearsals. I mean, Sam Mendes was always good for there. Let's just shoot it, And Joel and Ethan, invariably, you're shooting the final rehearsal before in front of the camera. I mean, they rehearse with the actors, but it's all very cursory. So often you shoot as soon as the actor comes on set. I just remember when I was starting out, yes, we would rehearse a lot with the actors to get the whole scene worked out, and then you think, well,
they get a bit burnt out.
Yeah, but actually, in the one case I'm thinking about, the director wanted the actors to be burnt out.
Yeah, right.
Because it was 1984.
Right.
So you're thinking, well, that's a great rehearsal, that's a great performance. But the problem was it was too good a performance, and you wanted something really as though the character was wasted, and in a way, over rehearsing was taking away the actor and the actor.
Right.
The acting and the actor. Yeah.
And sometimes they'll tell the actor it's the final rehearsal, but we're shooting it.
Oh yeah.
That seems a little mean, but they do.
Yeah. Oh, how often does that happen? Yeah, no, it's just a rehearsal.
Yeah.
Run the camera. They call it Kodak, don't they? They always used to call it a Kodak.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh. Why, it's 1.4 Kodak?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, so, well, Kodak, that means you're running.
Must have been an English thing.
Oh, yeah, probably was something.
How do you modify your approach to best suit the director of the film? We'll get to know the director.
I mean, you've got to adapt yourself to fit, whether it's with the director or with the actors or the rest of the crew. I mean, everybody adapts who they are to be able to collaborate over such a long period. But
And pretty much you sort of get the gist of the director in the prep, and you figure out whether they need time before they make a decision, you know, whether you need to back off, whether they want to go fast and loose, you know, whatever their working method is.
Yeah, you've got to judge what a director wants from you, because some directors, well, like Joel and Ethan, they're so knowledgeable about every aspect of filmmaking that you're not supporting in that sense like you might with somebody that's come from the theatre or has come from writing, and they don't actually have much sense of how to use a camera and to visualize their work, and they'll admit that. So you know, there's a whole range, isn't there? Yeah. How does your role change on an animated film?
The animated film has the whole crew there that are on the computers, and you're just there to consult and they always enjoy being able to try something different, to go out of the animated mold, you know, the child's cartoon mold, and do something new and fresh. So it's always a wonderful experience, because here are these people with great ideas that have never, you know, been able to do it.
I suppose we should just say that it's me that's got the credit as a consultant on these films, but actually we were always there together, weren't we?
Do you ever begin prep before the script is locked? Do you ever begin prep when the script is locked? I think would be better. Yeah, right.
I know, that really depends, doesn't it? It really depends on the director and the project. And yeah, I mean, sometimes the script comes together on the set. But other times, with Joel and Ethan,
that's different.
It's locked as soon as you're storyboarding, isn't it? You know, and probably you could say it was pretty well locked on Blade Runner before we started shooting. Little things on Sicario changed, and during prep, I know we discussed a number of the scenes, and little things would change, even in the dialogue. Yeah, some of it would change. So it depends really on the film, doesn't it, on the way you're working.
I know that I worked on a scene, on a script where we must have gone through all the colors and back again, but they didn't have a good distribution system, and they didn't have good communication on the set. So at one night we were all around the campfire trying to figure out what scene we were on, and I looked up and I realized everybody had a different color script page. So we were in big trouble. Nobody knew what was going on. So yes.
And it changed a lot on the film we met on Thunderheart.
Oh my gosh, that did.
Because sometimes Val would come in with a
new page that he had written.
Page written on a bit of toilet paper or something.
And you have to say, Val, you know, the problem with that is you can't take your gun because you threw it away. What we shot 3 weeks ago that comes right before, you threw it in the river, so that's not going to work.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. Mike trying to deal with the ideas that the actors had. But that's just a laugh, because it was actually ended up, I thought it was really a very good film. Over time, the podcast has become an invaluable archive for the craft of filmmaking. Was that part of the intention?
No.
Oh, no, definitely
actually,
not. Actually,
we started it because we had done a bunch of Q&As for 1917, and afterwards people would come up to us and ask us pretty much the same questions, a lot of technical questions, and I said to you that, well, maybe we should do a podcast that answers the same questions. And you said to me, what's a podcast? Yes. But then, so we started it right before COVID. And then as it kind of found its own way, and it became conversations. And it was much more interesting to us, because if we had stuck with technical questions, we would have done a few, and that would be it. Yeah. But then it became more about the collaboration on shooting a film, the fact that there are so many departments that are so important. The stunt guy is important. The the prop person is important, and letting people know what everyone did, and I found it interesting because we talked with a casting director, and I never had a chance to really sit down and talk to a casting director, so I learned a lot on that too. So it just kind of evolved in its own way.
But I think the point about being an archive of the craft, I think is interesting, because there are people that we've talked to that are on the podcast who are no longer with us.
Yeah,
Billy Williams.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is really kind of like a capturing the way things are done, or that were done last year or the year before.
Yeah, yeah.
Much like the book, Reflections. I mean, our work together, or my work in lighting, whatever, is that's like now a piece of history. That's how it was done.
Yeah, right.
It's not necessarily exactly the same techniques used today, is it? Which is interesting.
I think another thing that always comes out is the passion that everybody seems to share for telling the story.
Yeah.
I thought that was really
well,
interesting.
it's kind of nice to, like, yesterday and the day before, being at DePaul, with the students. It's nice to see that there's still continuity.
Yes.
And there's still people that love the idea of filmmaking and love films and as a medium. And thankfully, that hasn't changed.
Yes.
However, the film industry itself is changing.
Yeah.
The passion's still there. What would you be doing if you weren't in the film business?
Oh my God, I have no idea. You know that you'd be a meteorologist.
I kind of, sometimes still think I should have been a meteorologist, actually. Kind of important right now, isn't it?
Actually, I would be a software programmer, probably.
Yeah, you probably would, yeah. We were approached by a publisher about writing a book. And this is it.
Yeah.
And who wouldn't take the opportunity? So it's a kind of really, it's a mixture of how it's like the question we ask in the podcast: how did you start out? How did you get in the film industry? How did you get where you are today? And that's basically the book. So there's a lot about my life story and my early work in documentaries. And then there's, more detailed analysis of certain scenes in various films that I thought might be interesting to people.
And I think you also show how you may have an idea of how you're going to light something, but then you hit up against these problems of logistics, schedule,
the reality
location.
of filmmaking.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And yet you adapt and find another way to do it. And I think that's important sometimes for people starting out to know, so they don't think, oh, I failed because I couldn't do it the way I thought I was supposed to do it.
Yeah. So, it's one sense very personal, but it's also, a more general kind of discussion about, lighting and camera movement and all the rest. So.
And a couple of funny stories.
Oh, yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I find it funny anyway.